So in this session, we are going to talk about what are the things that we need to integrate into scene writing and possible things that we could avoid while developing scenes. So this session is called what to look out for and what to avoid in scene writing. So first thing is about the pacing of the film or pacing of the screenplay, so to say, because we are primarily talking about screenplays or discussing screenplays. So how do we go about maintaining good pace? We can have a better pace for a screenplay only when we keep in mind the structure of the scenes. So the moment you start structuring your scenes carefully, you will end up having a screenplay that has a good pace and is not full of dull patches. So what are dull patches? Dull patches are those segments within the screenplay or the scenes and sequences which doesn't make much sense but are there somewhere as a filler and kind of not take the film up to the mark. So what you need to do is you need to look at the screenplay as a whole, and then when we do scene divisions, keep those things in mind, that how are we integrating those scenes from one to another, and how are we structuring each scenes. So it contributes as a whole. If each scene is structured well, then it would contribute to the larger screenplay. You need to create scenes and sequences. The scene should have goal, conflict, disaster, while a sequel should always contain a reaction, dilemma, and decision. So let's look at each of them, what they mean and how they contribute to scene writing. By continually alternating between scenes and sequel, your screenplay will be consistently moving forward, something that makes screenplay a lot more engaging. So what matters, what counts is how you're proceeding from one stage of the screenplay to another. And while doing so, you have to be extremely careful regarding how you're developing each scenes. And sequels are basically the subsequent scenes that are going to follow. So sequels not we construed in the context of how we understand sequel in the movie format. Like we say that this is a sequel to another film. So similarly, you use the term to define what are the subsequent scenes that are going to come up. So while developing them, while writing them, if you are observing carefully, if you are writing carefully, then you would have a continuous movement. And that movement is progressive in nature. That movement is something that keeps your screenplays engaging to the readers, those people who are reading your screenplays, or those people who are going to view the film based on that screenplay. So scenes should always start with a goal. Okay, goal is highlighted as you could see. It is extremely important. It's something that I had been reiterating since the last couple of classes, that every scene must have a goal. So what is it that you want to say in that scene? If you as a screenwriter fail to capitalize on this question, that what is the goal of this scene, then you would end up writing something which is confusing. You'd end up writing something which is not clear. So what you need to do is, if there are characters in the scene, which they should ideally have, then you to identify what is their point of view. What does the character want in that scene? There could be one character, there could be multiple characters. But if there is one primary character in that particular scene, what is the goal of that character? What do they want to convey? What do they want to communicate? What do they want to share? What are they doing? So all those things need to be extremely specific and clearly defined for whoever is reading that screenplay or eventually the viewers. Your characters need to be driven. Okay. So what does that mean? That they must have some sort of a orientation towards life, philosophy, understanding of things, how they are going to proceed, pretty much as we observe in life. Okay. Uh, drifted human beings, those people who do not have any aim or goal in life, they are less likely to you know make it to screenplay stories. So you revisit any film and you would find a character driven by a goal. So they can't just be passive characters not doing anything. Then what would happen is you end up writing about that nothingness. Okay. If nothingness is the defined goal, then try to work around it. But otherwise, most of the times when you are making a straight up film, your characters need to meet the goal that they desire. And that is the time when readers or the viewers will be able to easily identify with the goals. You tend to identify with characters, you tend to resonate the values of the characters because of the character's goal, because the character's motivation, because what those characters are doing. So as a screenplay writer, your job in while writing the scenes is to give the character's goal a true existence. Doesn't matter whether the goal of that character is going to be nice or moral or is going to be conducive to the society or not. Okay, we are not looking at it, we are not looking at scene writing or screenplay writing or character development from a moralistic compass. Rather, we are trying to reflect upon life, we are trying to reflect upon society, we are constantly trying to comment on what is happening in our sociocultural and political existence as human beings. The other thing is what is crucial while developing screenplay, while developing scenes or writing scenes, is a defined conflict. Now, why does conflict arise? Conflict would arise as a result of the character attempting to reach their goal, and as a screenwriter, you're trying to obstruct that. So it's the primary obstacle that they must overcome, and in order to reach to the first step of the goal. And it's an extremely critical component of your scene. So while developing each scene, you must keep that in mind, that there is a goal, there is a conflict. The scene ends up with a conflict so that it progresses, because the reader is going would want, or the viewer would want, a resolution. We are wired in such a way that we want resolutions. We want resolutions in our life, we want resolution in literature, in poetry. We tend to look at it from that point of view. So as long as you don't establish goals and as long as you don't create conflict and obstacles, the scenes will not get completed. And nobody would be interested to read a story or view a film where the characters achieve all their goals too easily. That's not something that happens in life. When we are inspired by someone, we are inspired by that person's journey, and their journey is not all hunky-dory. So there are bumps, there are those slow curves, there are these stories of endurances. So it's all those things coming together that makes an interesting, inspiring life. Similarly, when you are developing scenes for a screenplay, a full-length feature-length screenplay, your primary objective as a screenplay writer is to give those characters flesh and blood through their journey, through their motivation, through the kind of conflicts they would encounter and the hurdles they would cross. Ending your scenes with a disaster creates a cliffhanger. What is a cliffhanger? Cliffhanger is something that creates some sort of a suspense within the audience's or the viewer's mind or the reader's mind. What is going to happen next? That's a cliffhanger. So if you're ending a scene with some sort of a disaster, things that is completely antagonistic to what the character wants to achieve, is the failure of that character at trying to achieve that goal that allows the reader or the viewers to look forward to what is going to happen next, because mentally they constantly prepare themselves subconsciously or consciously for the resolution. So by denying the resolution to those characters in particular scenes, you are trying to progress with the story. And failures are interesting to read about because they are going to create some sort of a momentum. They are going to create some sort of a framework to look out for, to achieve more, and it keeps the desire to proceed further within the reader or the audience's mind as to what is going to happen next. Sequels should always be used directly after a scene to allow your readers a chance to process what has just happened. So they look back and forth. They are looking forward to what is going to happen in the next scene, as well as they are going to mentally process what happened in the last scene. And subconsciously, you are trying to interject these two scenes. The sequel starts with a reaction. So remember, disaster has already happened. So in the next part, what you're trying to do as a screenwriter, somebody who is developing a scene, is create an immediate causality to the disaster. That if this has happened, something else is going to happen. So it's that reaction that propels the next part of the scene. Here, your character reacts to whatever occurred at the end of the scene before. Things that has happened previously would have consequences. If they have made any choices which are disastrous in nature, then there must be some sort of a collateral impact of that going further. So it's your character's reaction. It's what is important, and that's something that gives your readers and the characters time enough to process what's happened, and they would subsequently take actions accordingly. Then the dilemma. The dilemma gives your readers viewer a chance to worry about the character. Okay, and dilemma can be moralistic, can be physical as well. Here, your character often feels as though there are no good options, that there is no way to get back on track to achieve their goal, that you become a lost cause, that you get drifted, you get demotivated, that you lost your way. The fact that you are doing something which you don't want to do and you are maybe compelled to do because of certain situation, and you consistently try to justify that. You create a bubble around yourself, thinking and valuing that sort of a action, saying that okay, I'm not being able to do so because of XYZ reasons. We do that most often in life. And your characters are from here, they are from earth. The characters are you, the characters are your friends and families, the characters are people you know and you don't know, but they're all human beings and they undergo the same sort of emotions that all of us go through. So it's in those situations, what sort of rationalization they are holding on to. They are going to process that mentally, and a sequel should always end up with a decision. So it's extremely important that you have reaction, you have dilemma, followed by a decision which is extremely crucial, because what they are going to decide would again choose a consequential matter. Your character must choose what to do next based on the reaction, based on the kind of dilemma they are put in, whether this is the right thing to do or that is the right thing to do. Those of you who saw the film, attended the screening and saw the film, The Disciple, you'd know that, okay, there are constant dilemmas in the character's life, in the protagonist's life. Try and revisit the sequences, the juxtaposition of his struggles against a rising pop artist, whether to follow or pursue something which is extremely sacred, which is the Indian classical music, which is not offering much of popularity, success, money, fame, which easily a person in mid-20s, an aspiring singer, would end up thinking about, trying to juxtapose that. The dilemma that you can only be within yourself and not be able to, not be able to establish a relationship with the society in a certain way, you stay an outcast. That's a dilemma that you constantly face. Is there an artistic superiority complex that you experience? There's so many scenes where this thing is questioned, where this dilemma is established, and the decision. Uh, try to memorize the climax sequence where he finally walks out of that place, realizing constantly throughout that he is a mediocre average singer like his father. But it's the fact that you want to give life another chance, and that becomes a habit. You continue to do so because human life is full of hope. People tend to hope. Many a times, hopes do not get materialized, but you don't want to lose that something that you hold very dearly to your heart. So it's those decisions, it's that decision which becomes crucial. That few years later, he has grown a mustache, he has gotten married, he has a daughter, and he is doing exactly what his father was doing. Try to document, try to do a business around that. So it's that decision that is going to set the goal for the starting of the next scene. Every time that happens, in each scene, you will find these things. The next point is to create a strong sense of place through setting and time. This might seem obvious, but it is important to your readers, viewers, that they can tell when and where the scene is taking place. You need to inform them in your scenes, in your writing. Many writers view setting as simply the backdrop for the plot. However, drawing the readers, viewers into the setting is a great way to keep them invested in the story. What is the period that you are writing your film? Because the 90s is going to look extremely different than 2000s. 2010 is going to look different than 2000s. 2020 is going to look different than 2010. If I'm basing a film in 12th century, that's going to look different. If I'm writing a scene which is placed in western part of India, then southern part of India, that might look different. Because the characters, the costumes, the speech, all those things will vary. Whether it is a night scene or a day scene, that's going to create a different kind of an aesthetic. Sometimes a night scene is going to contribute a lot more to that particular scene or the subsequent scenes in a lot better way than day scenes. So it really depends on you as a screenwriter, how you are trying to integrate that space and time thing, what we understand as spatiotemporality, space and time, how you're using that. If you can smartly use that in your scenes will come out well. And whosoever is reading, they will stay invested into your story. Next point is utilize unique settings. It's obvious that writing unique settings is important. In a fantasy, dystopian, science fiction story, many times you would come across this, especially when you want to write a genre film. Hogwarts play a huge role in J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series. The Lord of the Rings trilogy wouldn't have been successful if Middle-earth wasn't so intricately incorporated into the plot. So it's those settings which matter because it lends the audiences, the viewers, the readers into the aesthetics of the atmospherics. It's a universe you're creating. However, when writing realistic or contemporary fiction, setting is still unimportant. So it's not just with fantasy or science fiction story. You can scout for real locations, unique places where you want to base your story, which could be interesting. For example, while a standard coffee shop is a relatable environment for your readers, viewers, a comic book themed cafe or a futuristically designed restaurant make much more interesting spaces for conversations. Because whosoever is reading, they are also reading into the place. So reading into the place allows the audiences, allows the readers to straight away enter into that space and have some sort of a physical connectivity with that space. It's not just the characters' actions or their motivations. It's also where they are. If your characters are regular to the local cafe, think about why they frequent that place. So it's your thought process as to why you're applying the logic of placing them. Like there is one story I have, which I have based in a highway bar. It's a one night story, extremely character driven. Most of them are engaging in conversations. There are 8 to 10 set of characters. And what kind of engagement they would have in a highway bar, which is close to a university. It's raining. They are all stuck. It's not a supernatural thriller or horror. It's a conversational drama, which kind of explores the complexities of human relationships with one another and the dynamics that we most of the times refuse to let go. Sometimes because of our egos, sometimes because of the kind of lack of exposure and opportunities that we have had. So how do you examine human relations? And how does a place like a highway bar contribute to this? Why not a conference hall? Why not a college? So you have to subconsciously justify within your mind why you are integrating this kind of locations. So it's the setting that plays an extremely significant role. What drives them to, or what connects them to that place? Also keep this in mind that your scenes work in a different environment. The settings play a very important role. The environment, many filmmakers, storytellers, writers are extremely location specific or setting specific. They want that particular setting to, and it works nicely for them. So while writing, I know why I have written this, why the highway bar is important, why people having conversation over a couple of drinks are going to be crucial. It could have been a cafe as well. How does alcohol contribute to this? How does rain, contribute to this? Who is going to come? Who is going to go? What happens there? And the exercise that you could do is try swapping the environment for something different. Like a gym with a blasting music or a space such as a library that's supposed to be silent. So in the silences of those corridors or between the bookshelves, what kind of action, what kind of conversations, what kind of characterial movements can you possibly establish? So think about all these things and see if you can come up with unique settings for your scenes. Avoid cliched settings. What does this mean? That there is no possible way it's raining every time your characters feel sad, or that it's sunny whenever they receive a good news. So that's a standard staccato way of looking at how writing is done. While these settings might reflect the tone of a scene, they can also feel a little too forced and unrealistic. That you want to create happiness by using a happy space. Doesn't necessarily work that way. You can have a lot of, you can have an extremely dark scene in a strong bright place. So it depends on you as a writer. So if you are smart and intelligent, you try to avoid preset setups. Because what happens is your readers, whoever is reading your screenplay, whoever is reading those scenes, they can see through you that you're trying to work it too hard, make them feel something. If it's not coming organically through the scene, through the screenplay, through the sequels, if it is forced, what happens is they would lose that emotional connect or a sort of a subconscious psychological relationship that they have slowly started developing in your words and your dialogues and how you're presenting them. While your settings can play a role in your character's emotion, often subtle references are more powerful than the really obvious tells, such as the weather. So if I'm integrating rain, if I'm integrating snow or extreme climates, then I have to justify why extreme climates work in those settings. So you have to see what works hand in glove with your character's emotions, the kind of characterial arc that you are trying to establish. For example, a yoga class is traditionally a peaceful place. While your character might be silently engaged in the class, outwardly, their inner thoughts and stream of consciousness could be in turmoil. Try and recollect again one scene from uh, The Disciple. There's this masturbation sequence. There was a masturbation scene, and then it immediately cut to the yoga class where the yoga teacher's commentary was going on. The try to let go. Allow all your inner feelings to come out while doing that pranayama. And then the camera slowly moves close to the character. It's brilliantly juxtaposed. So what is the intent of yours as a screenwriter? What you want to say or convey matters. This juxtaposes the character's emotion with the setting rather than using the setting to reflect those emotions. So this part is crucial. The setting is there as a place where the characters are going to operate. There's a reason why you go back home. Why don't you go back to railway station every day? Why do you come to college? Why don't you go to a park or a zoo every day? So if your character is supposed to be a student, he or she is supposed to go to an educational place. So settings are there. Write those settings which are unique, which are interesting. But remember, the settings are not supposed to be blown out of proportion. It's not the settings that should take precedence. It's the characters and what the characters are trying to say and do, their emotional graph, which matters, and whether they are complementing that setting or not. Next point is allow characters' motivation to drive the scenes, just like real people. Each of your characters have their own motivation and desires, something that I've been talking about since a long time now. That's where observational skills are extremely important for you as a screenplay writer. Draw from your life, draw from other people, people whom you know. What motivates people to do what they do? What do they desire? What do you desire? What do you want to become? What is the reason behind you wanting to become something? And which also keeps changing. You know, as a 5-year-old, you want to become a pilot. At 15, you might realize that no, I need to study marine engineering. At 22, you might be writing RBI exam, for all you know. All the decisions, are they following any kind of a motivation or a desire. So these are the things that you need to keep in mind while developing your characters within the scenes. These motivations to drive the character's action in scenes. Extremely tough, rugged characters are also going to experience failure, are also going to perish, are also going to feel frustrated. They're going to go through that emotional turmoil, and then they're going to recover and then get back to action. So what motivates them? Sometimes revenge motivates them. Sometimes aspiration motivates them. Sometimes love motivates them. Romance motivates them. Curiosity motivates them. The same way you are stimulated, your characters also need to get stimulated the same way. The character who doesn't want anything should not be included in that particular scene, because you're developing scene by scene. You are also simultaneously looking at the development of the character. If there is no role of a character, why should that character be there? If there is no role of a scene that is not contributing or adding on value to the overall screenplay, why do you want to keep that? Showcase different characters through your scene. Creating round characters belonging to different cultures and background not only creates a more diverse story, but also a more interesting one. Those differences give characters a unique perspective and allow them all react differently to the same situation. Take up films, take up television shows, you'll come across these kind of things, that why the diversity is important. The diversity is not just to reflect upon the integration of different cultures and background, but also it makes the set of characters interesting, how they come together, why they would bring in their unique perspective, and how they would react differently to the same situation. Sometimes anger drives you. At the same time, it could be something else for another character. Try to think about your characters as if they are real people. If you cannot empathize with your character's journey, their struggles, their aspirations, desires, motivations, then you would not be able to end up writing a good screenplay. So you have to understand real people. You have to understand your characters and respect them as real people. It's unrealistic to assume they will get on with everybody. It's not possible. We don't get along with everybody. So if you don't do, then why should the character do that? Just because he or she is the protagonist who is supposed to have some sort of a positive reflection upon life doesn't mean that they would get along with you. So we are also angry, we are also pissed. Similarly, characters might be. You can't put your protagonist in a scene with another character under the scheme, you're going to have scenes with more interesting dynamics. Somebody who is a bully, somebody who demotivates, somebody who creates that wrath or anger within your character. So those sort of antagonistic nature of other characters are going to create a certain kind of a power equation or a dynamic which is interesting to look at. So creating characters that clash because of their personal, cultural, or situational differences is an easy way to create tension. Remember, tension is something that holds that scene together. Explore characters' wants and needs, something that I had already spoken about, just reiterating again. This is something that you need to look out to. Each character in a scene needs to want something, and their desire should be extremely evident to the reader or viewer. Here in this case, reader, because somebody who is reading a screenplay will be a reader. The scenes where your characters are simply going about mundane, everyday action or making small talks are boring to read or view and to not drive your story forward. Why are you writing this film? Why are you writing that story? If you want that to be made into a screenplay, if your everyday actions are so routine that it's almost a reflection of everything that happens in the everyday life of a common man, then why would I want to read that screenplay, or why would I want to make a film, or why would the audience or the viewers come to the theater to watch it? Because they're already living that life. So there must be something to offer. By something to offer, I don't mean fantastical things or out of the ordinary things all the time, but some sort of a difference, a detour from the regular. What motivates them? So you need to find that what the characters want and what do they need. If there is something you struggle with, try mapping out your character's motivation visually. See what you do. Write out what each character's overall motivation is. When I say each character, whosoever you are including. If I have 10 characters, if I have 12 characters, write each character's motivation. Create a characterial arc. What do they want to achieve or receive by the end of the narrative? If a Ram is there and a Ravan is there, what does Ram wants to achieve? What Ravana wants to achieve? You can't just write about Ram and tell the story from Ram's perspective. If you have to create a Ravana who is also a potential antagonist who would clash with the ideology of the protagonist, then you need to write their motivations as well. And break this overall goal into small desires they need to acknowledge first. The smaller motivations should be what drive the interaction in the scene. Small little things. How do you establish that somebody is a pet lover? Integrate that into the scene. And in the 30th page, 30 minutes later, that scene might come handy because you have already created a reference point for your character, having some sort of a feeling for the pet. If your character's interactions are not motivated by any specific desire, consider incorporating one or removing the scene altogether. Like I told you, there are no desires, no goals, no dilemmas, no reactions, then the scene is not working. By creating characters who all want different things, your scene will instantly become a lot more interesting. The more you are conflicted, the better it is for the writing. And when I say you are conflicted, means you not as a person, not necessarily your character, I mean to say, and what you are writing in that situation. Include plenty of action, because actions are important aspects to any story. While you don't have to have huge action sequences or massive character breakdowns in every scene, a little bit of tension can go a long way. And tensions can be built through conversations, tensions can be built in different ways. It need not be always fights and character breakdowns. Start and end scenes effectively with conflict. As I've already spoken about. Beginning a scene with conflict will help to draw readers in and ensure they continue reading. Because your job as a successful screenwriter is that they browse through pages and pages. A small argument between characters or including a character's pet peeve are good ways to incorporate tension in the beginning of your scenes. Another way to begin a scene with conflict is to come in during the middle of something. If you start a scene with a gun held at your protagonist's head, your readers, viewers are going to be pulled in. What is going to happen next? Finally, is he going to get killed? Or is he or she going to get spared? What happens next? I can remember Iskia starting with that, the Hindi film, starting with the two characters at the gunpoint. That's why this film begins. So now you know that okay, there's something that is going to happen. Why are these two people there in such kind of situation? Starting the scene this way allows you to hold the attention while you explain the leader. What is the reason or motivation of the other characters to behave with those leads in this way? Ending a scene with conflict creates a cliffhanger, which also helps entice your readers, audience to continue reading, viewing something good. It's important that you incorporate a cliffhanger seamlessly at the end of a scene so it doesn't feel too cliched or gimmicky for your readers. So if every scene at the end of the scene, if you retain a cliffhanger, it might not work. It works most of the times in genre films like horror, supernatural thriller, where the audiences or the readers are always on this edge of the seat, to think what is going to happen next. But it might not work in relationship dramas all the time. Explore characters' emotions. The emotional journey of a characters undertake. The emotional journey your characters undertake is an important component of your writing. Is that arc and the emotional development that is often examined through the way they have changed from beginning to the end of the screenplay. Smaller developments can be incorporated on a scene level. So you are constantly trying to break them down. If you are denying the character the achievement, whatever, or the success of their goal, they are going to go through some sort of an emotional turmoil or the other. You want to become a cricketer, you can't become a cricketer. You broke your arm. You wanted to go into the defense forces, but you're falling short of height or your eyesight doesn't match. That thing remains with you now and forever. And the characters are all about emotions. So it's the expression of those emotions which are crucial. And they keep changing. They allow you to develop that emotional arc. So those things could be integrated, at a scene level. This development could come in the form of an epiphany, or by having a character end the scene feeling a different emotion than what was there in the beginning. Using emotion is an easy way to incorporate conflict into a seemingly peaceful scene. Everything is going fine and steady, constant. Boom. Here's the thing. Bring in a little tension. It happens. You could be calm all day and some one thing happens. There could be any triggering moment and you get pissed. And being in that state of a rage, people can do anything. People can kill, people can break relationships, people can break things. That's how we tend to define people, right? He's an angry person. He's a person who is extremely calm and composed. Why do we talk like that? When we talk like that, there's a possibility and a reason behind this. That we often tend to identify those people with those emotions. Try and keep that in mind. The last part of this slide, show, don't tell, something that I've been again reiterating. I'll end up with this saying that how you need to get used to the idea of not explaining the story, but start showing the story. How do we? Because our job as a screenplay writer while developing scenes is to show, not tell. So we need to move from the telling writing. If you see telling writing and showing writing, both are um, bold letters. For the primary reason that I want you to emphasize on this, you are not engaging in oral storytelling. Essentially, what you are writing is visual. So you need to show. To avoid telling writing the scenes, first thing is to use dialogue, the best possible way to do. That you are not describing, rather you are trying to tell things through dialogues. What dialogues do is they allow readers to explore the scene as they were there. Dialogues bring the audiences into the scene. They can also help with characterization, providing emotion and accentuating the mood. That's why certain dialogues become extremely famous. Certain dialogue work in certain scenes. Those scenes work because of those dialogues. So try and do this fun exercise. Try to write a complete story using dialogues. So everything will move through the dialogues. You are not going to describe anything. If you see Quentin Tarantino's film, he's a brilliant dialogue writer. You'd see his scenes are usually long, extremely long scenes. And they work because there is some sort of a subtextual layering to those dialogue writing. What those characters speak are going to be consequential in nature. They're going to create things that would matter later in the. Then use the senses. Another way to avoid telling writing is to make use of all the five senses. Evoking the senses require readers or the viewers to recall their own experiences. The moment you try to touch upon those things, you are drawing in the readers. They are going to use their experiences to visualize, and hence those things become identifiable. Try to focus on underused senses. Writers most often tend to focus on the senses of sight, touch, and hearing because they're convenient to write. Smell and taste are equally evocative. So if you can write something about how whoever is reading or viewing can smell or taste a certain thing, that could draw attention of the viewer or the reader. Last part is the description. The description is sometimes problematic because it's so easy to overdo, because you are all excited and gung-ho about writing your first screenplay. You tend to describe everything. Remember, the job description is to paint a scene, but only the necessary parts of that scene. If you are describing everything, then you are writing a novel, you're not writing a screenplay. Remember, a novel is an end-to-end product. A screenplay is not. A screenplay is a byproduct of a visual narrative, which is going to be translated into cinema. So you do not need to include every detail. Describe what is relevant, describe it in a new and a fresh way, and that is something that makes the screenplay and the scenes work and interesting. For example, instead of this telling writing sentence that John is very tall or John was very tall, try something like John kept bumping his head on the top of the door frame. So whoever is reading is trying to imagine John in that setup. So that is a door frame. And if John's head is hitting, which means it could possibly be because John is a taller person. So it's that sort of a transformation in writing which becomes crucial. And yeah, so this is what I wanted to share or discuss about what you need to expect from yourself while developing scenes, what are the things that you could possibly look out for, and what you could avoid. So I'll stop here. Thank you.